Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lau, for allowing me to present. I will be presenting the work titled "Does Human Capital Compensate for Depopulation?" That is the work of my collaborators and I, Michael Kuhn, Klaus, Prettner, and Alexia Prskawetz here at the WID. And can I go further? Oh, like this. Okay. So in a nutshell, what do we do in this paper? We try to empirically analyze the degree to which the fertility loss is being compensated by the increments in human capital. Why is this? Okay. And then in particular, we would like to focus the study on countries in particular that are experiencing depopulation, because
you're muted, Martina. You somehow muted yourself.
How? Okay, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
okay.
You're back.
Okay, did you hear the previous slide or not? Yes, okay. Somehow when I click the next slide, it mutes me. Sorry. So the reason for focusing on depopulation countries is that fertility and its decline has most severely impacted and was the driving force. Well, one of the driving forces behind depopulation in these countries, which have long-term economic consequences. And let's see if. How do I go this way? Yes. Okay. Sorry. And I will just show you some of the graphs to further motivate our study. So on the left-hand side, you can see the trends in annual rate of population change that are current 2015 to 2020. And on the right-hand side, you can see the predictions for the next 10 to 15 years. And in both cases, you may observe that the Eastern Europe, especially the Balkans and the Baltic countries, but Europe overall is being the one that is experiencing population decline overall, but this situation will worsen in the upcoming years and will further highlight the differences in the trends, especially, let's say, in the African countries. So these are just some correlations to just motivate the study. On the left-hand side, you may observe the human capital index provided by the payroll tables and the fertility rate. These are 5-year averages, and this just goes to show some of the trade-off, which has been found not only in the theoretical literature, but also in the empirical literature, where there is some sort of a quality-quantity trade-off between fertility and human capital gains. And then in our study, what we do, we also include and control for migration, particularly net migration, because that is also one of the key explanatory variables when it comes to depopulation, where especially in the Balkan countries, what they're experiencing is not only the impact of low fertility, but at the same time, the simultaneous outward migration to the, let's say, richer countries. And as we can see, since this is the net migration, a lot of the observations are centered around 0, because it is calculated by the amount of immigrants coming into the country minus the migrants leaving the country, and this is normalized by the population size. But nonetheless, we may observe some of the positive correlation, but let's see if the actual regressions confirm that. And then we further would like to present the relationship or the kind of the trends between fertility and migration. So we have created these somewhat quadrants where this red line across these graphs represents fertility at level 2, which is kind of the cutoff line for the replacement fertility. And and that's for the horizontal axis, and the vertical axis represents the net migration. And I won't get into the specific graphs of each, but we may observe as the trends progressively shift toward lower fertility rates and more on the negative net migration side. But yeah, there is so much to cover and so little time. All right. So I just would like to refer to some of the kind of keystone in the literature that we are building on. And in particular, human capital in economics has been long studied and recognized in its importance in economic growth. So, for instance, you have the Lucas paper where it looks at the individual productivity and output. Then you have the papers concerning human capital and research and development and technological progress, like Strulig in 2013 and Romer from 1990, and then the typical, like a classical quality quantity trade-off that is based on Becker, and then followed up with other Becker papers like Tamura and then Barrow and Becker. And then another line of literature that has been developing is looking at the extent to which the negative consequences of declining fertility are being compensated by the increments in health and educational investments, such as Prettner and et al. 2013. Oh, I think it muted me again. Did it? I don't know.
You're fine.
All right.
Oh, okay. Now I'm hearing it. Sorry. I just provide for some of a typical theoretical framework before I get to the empirics. So we look at the aggregate output in the economy that is defined by the technological progress, physical capital, and aggregate human capital. And let me reiterate that it is the aggregate human capital which we further decomposed and calculated by the fertility rate, individual human capital, and the previous generation size. And then in order to capture the elasticities, which we're after, we derive the following equation in order to see how to interpret our results. So the typical quality, let's say the quality quantity trade-off from Becker, it states that even though you lose some fertility, so you have fewer children, but the children that you have are better educated, and this would be the this trade-off would be exactly compensated at exactly -1. Any value lower than that would represent overcompensation. Anything that any value lower than that until 0, so between 0 and -0 and -1 and 0 would imply a partial compensation, which is what has been the trend and the finding in recent literature, and 0 would imply no compensation. And an extreme case, which is highly unlikely, would be where, let's say, a poor country that would, on top of the economic crisis, would be struggling to the point where, let's say, not only parents are having fewer children, but the children are not better educated because they cannot make these investments. But that is inconsistent within the framework of Becker of the quality quantity trade-off. All right, so since there are so many ways of calculating human capital, and there has been some critiques of it, and the human capital index that we're using is from Penwell tables that is based on the Burrell and Lead and Cohen and Lecker papers and databases, which capture solely the educational attainment. We also, for the sake of sensitivity analysis and robustness checks, have created additional 4 measures of human capital that also capture health investments. So on the left-hand side, we have the human capital, and that is calculated by e to the power of return on health times the survival rate over 65 plus the years of education and return on education. That is kind of following the typical Mincian approach. And then we have a second equation for creating our human capital index, human capital stock, where we take apart the educational attainment by the distinct levels. And for each of the educational attainment level, we have its separate return on education for that level. And these specifications are summarized in table 1. So, and the difference between the level, I mean, as I've mentioned, we have 4 measures of human capital, and the difference between them is not only the specification from equation 3 and 4, but also the return on health, which has been found to be around 9.10% from Struligenov from 2013, but also around 6.7% from Vail 2014. So there is about 1/3 of a difference, which we've thought to be significant. So for robustness checks, we have included also these different measures.
Martina, can I just jump in?
So for our econometric.
Martina, sorry, can I just jump in with a sort of 4 to 5 minute warning?
Yes, okay, perfect. So for econometric estimation, we have human capital on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we have fertility lagged by 2 periods, and then net migration and the control and a compensate error term. We have long panel data stemming from 1960 to 2015. The variables obtained are from like fertility, adult survival rates is from World Bank, net migration is from Wittgenstein Center, years of schooling are from Liam Barrow educational attainment data set. Absence of correction due to data availability, we have chosen the global state of democracy indices. GDP and human capital index are from pinwheel tables and agricultural value added, and the gross capital formation are from FAO. So then to some of the results. So this is just from the main specification and using the human capital index from pinwheel tables. We see that the impact of loss of fertility is about 0.10%, because we're estimating the elasticity. When it comes to human capital, it is henceforth only a partial compensation. When the migration is not included, and when net migration is included in our estimates, the results do not vary significantly, and it's around 0.09%. And the migration has a negative impact on human capital, is what we found, and it's around 0.15%. And this is for these are the estimates for the entire panel. And now what we, as I've mentioned initially, we wanted to focus on the population countries. So these are the results for the subsample of the population countries. So the elasticity of fertility changes slightly when net migration is included. So it further falls by additional 0.2%. And when it comes to migration, we find that the impact is about 3 times the size it was when the entire panel was included, as you may see right here. And we would interpret that as, given the limitation of the fact that we're working with net migration rather than separate immigrants and immigrants, but what we intuit, so to speak, is that the people that are immigrating into these countries, these are like the Balkan, Eastern Europe's, European countries is that these are the people with even lower human capital than the countries that are taking them in, and henceforth the human capital is being further diminished, and hence the negative impact, and the impact is quite big. Let me see, and these are just some sensitivity analysis for all of the other human capital measures, the human capital stocks that we have created, and the results are robust. They're between 0.09 and 0.10% when it comes to elasticity of fertility. And unfortunately, the impact of net migration loses its statistical significance for the other human capital measures. We believe that there are some other things going on. I mean, since it does include health effects, and migration has some compositional impacts, then we believe that might be part of it, but it is hard to disentangle as we're working with the net migration. So basically, just to summarize, the goal of our paper was to disentangle the impact of fertility on human capital, and the contribution to the already existing literature is that we have extended the framework by including net migration. We have also included many more controls, such as corruption in agriculture and so on. And we have also we have constructed human capital measures in order to also account for health investments. What we have found is consistent with the literature is that fertility is partially compensated by the excuse me, that is a typo. That human capital is only partially compensated by educational and health investments. And that is consistent also when controlling for net migration. And what we found is that the level of compensation is even lower for depopulation countries, and that immigration into these countries is negatively impacting its human capital levels. For future research, we would like to look at maybe the quality of education, because not only the length of education matters, but also its quality. And this was kind of the stepping stone that we wanted to explore in order to look at the fertility loss and its impact on GDP. Thank you very much.